While we get ready for season 22 of 5 Minute Biographies, join us for a 10-part special. Over 10 working days, we will present 10 biographies of fictional characters, but presented as if those characters were real, just for fun. I hope you enjoy them. This is episode 4, Atticus Finch. In the turbulent landscape of the American South during the 1930s, few figures embodied moral integrity and human decency more completely than Atticus Finch. A lawyer, father, and reluctant hero, Finch stood against the prejudice and injustice of his time with the calm conviction that truth and fairness were worth defending, even when the cost was high. His life became a touchstone for ethical courage, proof that dignity could survive even amid society's worst failures. Atticus Finch was born in the closing years of the 19th century in the small town of Finch's Landing, Alabama. The Finch family traced its roots back to English settlers who had arrived generations earlier, establishing themselves as part of the old agrarian order of the Deep South. While his ancestors were planters and landowners, Atticus chose a different path, one that would set him apart from the tradition-bound expectations of his heritage. He attended the State University, where he studied law at a time when the South was still struggling to rebuild its identity after the Civil War and Reconstruction. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Finch believed the law should serve as a shield for the vulnerable, not a weapon for the powerful. He returned to his hometown of Macomb to open a small legal practice, determined to uphold justice in a society still divided by class, race, and memory. Macomb, Alabama, was the kind of town that seemed preserved in amber, sleepy, sun-drenched, and bound by old habits. The Great Depression had stripped away what little prosperity the community had enjoyed, leaving its people poor but proud, and its divisions more visible than ever. It was here that Atticus Finch built both his career and his quiet reputation for fairness. He lived in a modest house near the town square with his 2 children, Jeremy, known as Jem, and Jean-Louise, nicknamed Scout. Widowed when the children were young, Finch devoted himself to their upbringing with the same calm patience he brought to the courtroom. His household was watched over by Calpurnia, the family's African-American housekeeper, whose intelligence and authority helped shape the children's sense of justice and equality. Despite his gentle manner, Finch was a man of deep conviction. He served on the local legislature, guided by the belief that democracy demanded participation, even in places where change came slowly. He was respected, though not universally admired. His empathy and moderation were often mistaken for weakness by those who valued conformity over conscience. The defining test of Atticus Finch's life came in the early 1930s, when he was appointed to defend a black man, Tom Robinson, accused of assaulting a white woman, Mayella Ewell. The case was explosive, not only for its subject, but for what it revealed about Macomb's soul. In a society built on segregation and fear, the idea of a white lawyer defending a black defendant against a white accuser was considered a betrayal of custom and race. Finch accepted the case not out of pride or ambition, but because he believed that every person deserved a fair trial, and that justice meant little if it was not extended to those whom society preferred to ignore. His decision brought quiet hostility from neighbours and open insults from strangers, but he never wavered. In court, Atticus dismantled the prosecution's argument with precision and restraint. He demonstrated that Mayella's injuries had been inflicted by someone left-handed, and that Tom Robinson's left arm had been rendered useless in an accident. He exposed the prejudice that underpinned the accusation, revealing it as the desperate act of a poor, ignorant family trying to preserve a false sense of superiority. Yet despite the clarity of the evidence, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Finch accepted the decision with dignity, though he knew it was unjust. When Tom Robinson was later killed attempting to escape from prison, Finch bore the grief with quiet composure, knowing that his small act of defiance had at least forced his community to look at itself honestly, even if it did not yet have the courage to change. Beyond his role as a lawyer, Atticus Finch was above all a father. He raised Jem and Scout not through lectures but by example. He taught them that courage was not a man with a gun in his hand, but someone who fights for what is right, even when he knows he will lose. His lessons were profound but straightforward, that empathy was the foundation of understanding, and that morality meant standing in another person's shoes before passing judgment. In a world still ruled by hierarchy and prejudice, these ideas were revolutionary. Through his quiet words and steady integrity, he became not only a model of parenthood, but a symbol of conscience itself. Neighbours often mistook his calm for passivity, but those who knew him best understood that Atticus possessed a steel of character that could not be bent. His restraint came not from weakness but from principle. He believed that anger clouded reason, and that progress, however slow, was built on dialogue rather than hatred. In the years following the Robinson trial, Finch continued his legal work, often taking on unpopular cases that others refused. Though he never sought higher office, he became a moral authority in the county, a man whose opinion was sought even by those who disagreed with him. He opposed lynching and voter suppression, arguing that the law's legitimacy depended on its fairness. He also supported education as a means to break the cycle of poverty and ignorance that sustained prejudice. In later years, he served as an advisor on state committees focused on legal reform, pressing quietly for change in an era when loud voices were often silenced by violence. His law office remained modest, lined with books and papers rather than wealth. He refused to profit from injustice or accept cases that conflicted with his conscience. "The one thing that doesn't abide by majority rule," he once said, "is a person's conscience." It was a sentiment that defined him as much as any verdict ever could. By the time of his death in the late 1950s, Atticus Finch had become more than a small-town lawyer. He was a moral compass for a generation. His life inspired young lawyers, civil rights advocates, and ordinary citizens who saw in him a reminder that justice required courage, patience, and humanity. Historians later came to see Finch as a bridge between the Old South and the modern era, a man who upheld the rule of law even when it exposed the flaws of the society he loved. His approach was evolutionary, not revolutionary. He sought to change hearts as well as laws. Critics argued that his faith in the system was naive, yet few could deny that his quiet example helped lay the moral groundwork for the civil rights movement that followed. In education, Finch became a staple of American classrooms, studied as a symbol of ethical integrity and moral reasoning. For generations of students, his story served as both a historical lesson and a moral challenge, to see the world as it is, but strive for what it ought to be. Atticus Finch's enduring appeal lies in his humanity. He was not perfect. His restraint sometimes frustrated those who wanted faster justice. His optimism sometimes seemed misplaced. Yet his imperfections made him real, a man navigating moral complexity without losing his centre. He understood that law and morality were not always aligned, and that change was a slow and often painful process. But he also believed that progress, however incremental, began with individuals who refused to compromise their conscience. In his quiet defiance, Finch captured something universal: the struggle to do good in a flawed world. Atticus Finch's life remains a testament to the idea that decency can be a form of rebellion. He lived by principle rather than popularity, guided by a belief that justice was not an abstract concept, but a daily practice. In the courtroom, he spoke for the voiceless. At home, he taught his children to think for themselves. In his community, he stood firm when it would have been easier to bend. He was, in the truest sense, a gentleman, not by birth or wealth, but by conduct. His quiet voice, tempered by reason and compassion, continues to echo across generations, reminding us that the measure of character is not found in triumph, but in the courage to stand alone when standing alone is the only right thing to do. Thanks for listening to the 5 Minute Biographies podcast. from 5minutebiographies.com. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts, or if you would like to support us more directly, why not consider buying us a coffee? Head on over to 5minutebiographies.com/coffee to see how. Also, why not check out our other 5-minute podcasts, which you can find at 5minuteproductions.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.